Hi Helen, thanks for coming along today. You're here to tell us a little bit about Weedbusters. So what is Weedbusters?
Weedbusters is an interagency organisation that's encouraging people to be active in controlling weeds in their communities.
Right. So there's different offices around the country, or?
Weedbusters has just one national coordinator, Carolyn Lewis, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. And then in each of the regions, there's one or two regional coordinators who usually work for either Department of Conservation or regional councils and do that as part of their job.
Right.
And then there's lots and lots of organisations that are signed up to Weedbusters, so Weedbuster groups.
Right. And what do the groups aim to do? Are they encouraged to target particular weedy plants? Or?
Really, Weedbusters helps people to do things rather than telling them what they have to do. So a group will have maybe an interest in their own local reserve, and they'll come to Weedbusters and get information and material to help them.
So what's this? Is it a weed sort of thing, is it?
Well, it's more about how you set up a group and how you get other people involved, the sort of material you can use to explain to people about weeds, and how you organise buying tools and those sort of things.
Right, so, yeah. And who's involved mostly in Weedbusters?
Well, nationally, there's the regional councils, Department of Conservation, Forest and Bird, organisations like the nursery and garden industry.
Yes.
Yep.
So the nurseries are on board?
Yes, yep. I mean, Weedbusters deals a lot with gardening issues, and we encourage people to buy species that are going to stay in the garden rather than jumping over the fence.
Yes.
So it's good for the garden industry as well, because we're not trying to stop people from gardening. We want them to keep on gardening, but just to be thoughtful about what plants they use.
So known problem plants can be replaced by native plants, or other?
Certainly in Weedbusters we don't say, oh, you should only plant natives.
No.
It's really nice if people want to plant native species, but there are lots and lots of garden species that are no problem at all.
Yeah, both native and exotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So what are the main weed species that we should all be very concerned about?
Well, it's always hard to predict what the next one's going to be, but a lot of species that come out of gardens, things like Tradescantia, the wandering dew, I don't think people deliberately plant that anymore because it just grows like mad.
And survives low light as well.
Yes, and just the smallest fragment can spread. But, we want people to be thoughtful about how they dispose of their garden waste. So something like Tradescantia that can only grow from a really small fragment needs carefully disposing of. You can't just sort of tip it over the fence. Yes.
Into the nearest swamp or
yes.
something. And what are they supposed to do? They take it down to the landfill, or is there special places to take things like that?
Normally, any seeds or fruit on plants that could grow and should be really carefully disposed of. So if you're composting at home, you wouldn't want to put that sort of thing, and you certainly wouldn't want to put Tradescantia on your compost heap because it would just go bananas. It would be ideal conditions for it. But where green waste is composted, most plant material is okay.
Right, old man's beard, banana passion fruit, purple loosestrife. Yeah. So a lot of them.
Yes, so if you've got a composting system that actually can deal with all those weeds, that's fine, but otherwise dispose of the material that won't regrow in your compost heap, but the seeds, put them in the rubbish that goes to the tip, but then they get buried deep enough.
Yeah, so they're not going to come back and haunt us. Yeah. So who who's doing the work on the ground? Is the volunteer groups mostly, is it? Or
Yep.
council staff? Or?
Quite often you have volunteers working with council staff. People are really concerned about parks and reserves where the councils or DOC doesn't have the money and the staff to be able to completely look after all their parks and reserves. So where a local group wants to get involved, it's an ideal situation for Weedbusters, and the local council quite often will help with giving help and guidance and maybe providing trees to plant so that when you've cleared the weeds you can then get a cover of desirable plants so you slow the return of the weeds.
Get some shade on the soil. Most weeds hate shade, except for Tradescantia. Are there any other sort of well-known strategies for helping combat weeds?
Mainly it's persistence. I guess too often we think we want the one-hit solution to controlling weeds, and quite often you just have to keep coming back time after time over several years. Because that's one of the things people do, a great big burst of enthusiasm and clear a whole area of a weed, and then they're utterly exhausted and don't do anything, and before they know where they are, the weeds have come back again.
That's right. The seeds are in the soils and they come.
It helps to have a plan and to know how often you're going to need to treat weeds and what the correct treatment methods are. There's a range of treatment methods, so for people who don't like using herbicide, there are physical control methods, but the Weedbuster website is quite good for giving that sort of information.
Yes. And there's that herbicide gel out these days too.
Yes.
So if you're not into spraying all around your garden, you can still use this gel.
Yeah.
Quite safely. Yeah, very handy tool. So how do we find out what weeds we've got and which ones are problems?
The best people to talk to are your local council, regional or district council, Department of Conservation, local gardeners, forest and bird. There's lots of people with ideas about, with lists of weeds as well.
Right. And do some councils help with work or money or?
Yep. Obviously some councils have a lot more resources than others.
Yes.
And quite often if you get a group going that's really interested and wants information, you can get people to come and talk to you. But you can also persuade your council that you've got a project really well worth doing, particularly if you're prepared to put some of the effort in yourself. They usually come to the party.
Yeah, well planted if you help us get some control over the weeds. Right. So how do we contact Weedbusters, and what sort of events are run by Weedbusters?
Right. Well, Weedbusters has a website, as per the T-shirt.
Yes, very nice.
And there's lots of information about the weed species, what they look like, how to control them. But there's also details of contacts, so you can find out who your regional coordinators are.
Right.
And also on the website there's details of what events are going on. We have an awards every 2 years to recognise some of the groups that have done really fantastic work in weeds.
Yes.
Some groups have started off very, very small as part of Weedbusters and realised the potential for going out and getting sponsorship, and they're doing tremendous things out there now.
Yes. Something about a fishing rod and spraying up on cliffs. I heard a story about a wee while ago.
Yes, lots of ingenious methods.
Yes, determined people.
It can be a little bit addictive, once you've got a weed in your sights, you keep going at it again and again. Another event that Weedbusters does is the Dirty Weekend.
Oh, yes. Tell us more.
That's in October, and it's to encourage people to have a look in their garden and maybe dig some of the weeds out and replace them with species that are a lot better and less likely to escape into the environment.
Right.
And there's various competitions around the Dirty Weekend for photographs and things like that.
And does someone pick up the weeds and get rid of it for them or something like that?
No, really it's encouraging people to do it themselves. So that they know how to dispose of the weeds properly rather than somebody else taking care of it. But there are all sorts of other events, in various places there are weed swaps where people can bring in plants that they don't even know what they are and get some experts to look at them and check them and say what they are, and then they can swap their weed for a native plant and take that home as a replacement. So, but it's sort of one of these organisations where any good ideas are taken up and people are encouraged to get on and do these things, and then the ideas are shared around the Weedbuster groups so somebody else can pick up on ideas, like chopping down pine trees and selling them at Christmas, this sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, wildling pines
yes.
for Christmas. Sounds fair enough. And would you say that Weedbusters is working? How long has it been running for?
It was first sort of started in 2003, and one of the early things they did was actually go out and do some opinion surveys on people's attitudes to gardening and to weeds and what to do about weeds and who should be dealing with it.
Oh, yes.
And they've recently followed that up with some more surveys, and there's been quite an increase in awareness of weeds and weed issues and people knowing more about what to do about weeds. So it's really encouraging that it does seem to be having an effect.
Oh, great. Well done to the team. And it's a big team, I think, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's one national organiser who that's one of her main jobs, but everybody else, it's just a small part of their job, or they're volunteers doing it in their own time.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't covered you'd like to say?
Well, I think that, Weedbusters is at the garden show because they think it's really important that gardeners are aware of the problems weeds can cause and that they can actually have a real effect in protecting our environment.
Very good. Thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you.